We begin today the Gemara on Daf Nun Ches Amud Beis, 2 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. So the Gemara here is discussing a statement that Rabbi Yochanan said that Rabbi Yosi, in the Mishnah here, and this is actually Rabbi Yosi ben Chalafta, as Rashi here points out, that in Shas, Stam Rabbi Yosi is Rabbi Yosi ben Chalafta. That his opinion is that the position of the Mizbeach in the Azara was completely on the north. And the Gemara explained why, based on a Mishnah in Midas, where it speaks about where the fire, there was this, the Marach HaShniya, the second fire of the Mizbeach, where was it? It was close to the Draimis, Maravis Draimis of the Mizbeach, but it was removed 4 Amas. And the Gemara explained before Barichas HaCheshbon that the only way to explain why it was there exactly in that position, removed from the wall 4 Amas, is because the Mizbeach was completely on the Tzafin, and therefore the Gemara said that this goes according to Rabbi Yosi. Okay, now, the Gemara brought before that it's not necessarily Rabbi Yosi. It could also be according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And that Mishnah could also be explained if you would say that the Mizbeach was actually centered right in the middle of the Azara. Now the Gemara is going to bring a third pshat, basically going back to the first pshat that it said before, that the Mizbeach was completely on the Tzafin of the Azara, but it's not necessarily Rabbi Yosi, which, as I mentioned, is Rabbi Yosi ben Chalafta. It's a different Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi Aglili, and the Gemara here will bring a braisa of Rabbi Yosi Aglili that will prove that he's the one that holds that the Mizbeach was on the Tzafim, completely on the Tzafim. So the Gemara, Rav Shravya says, Ha mani, who is this Mishnah that we quoted that proves that the Mizbeach was completely on the Tzafim? According to that pshat the Gemara said before, Rabbi Yosi Aglili. Rabbi Yosi Aglili, he's the one that holds the Mizbeach was on Tzafim. Where do we see this? Tanya, we learned in the Braisa. Rabbi Yosi Aglili says, from this, that the pasuk says, "V'nasata sakiyor bein oil mayid v'gaimer." The pasuk says that the kiyar should be positioned between the oil mayid, and then the pasuk says ubein hamizbeach, between the oil mayid and the mizbeach. That's by the Mishkan, and the same by the Beis Hamikdash. The kiyar should be between the mizbeach and the Beis Hamikdash. That's one pasuk. And v'kas of echad, the Bachir adds v'kas of echad, and then there's another pasuk where it says Oimer, it says v'es mizbach ha'oila v'gaimer, that where should the mizbech be positioned? So and the pasuk goes on to say that it should be positioned Pesach Mishkan Oil Mayid, by the opening going into the Oil Mayid, or similar by the Beis Hamikdash, that it should be by the opening of the Heichal, which means there should be no separation. There should be nothing that's blocking between the Mizbeach and the opening of the Heichal. So Mizbeach bepesach Oil Mayid, that means that only the Mizbeach is by the opening of the Oil Mayid. V'lei kir bepesach Oil Mayid, but the kir cannot be there between the Mizbeach and the opening of the Oil Mayid to block. So therefore, how do we explain these two psukim? One pasuk is saying that the kir is between the Mizbeach and the Oil Mayid, and the other pasuk is saying that the kir cannot block the entrance into the heichal between the mizbeach and the entrance. So therefore, the Braisa concludes, Rabbi Yosi Aglili, that is, concludes, Heichen hayu noisnai, where was the kir positioned? Beina ulam lemizbeach, it was positioned between the ulam and the mizbeach, but not actually between them. Moshuch kima klapei adarim. However, it was removed a little bit towards the south. So it wasn't actually between. It was between in that position of the Azara, but towards the south. It cannot be in between, because if it would be in between, it would be blocking the entrance between the Mizbeach and the entrance of the Heichel, and the Mizbeach has to be Pesach Oil Mayid. Till there's the Braisa. So now the Gemara is going to go through a lengthy discussion showing us all the options that this is not even a problem. You could have the kiyar to be between the Mizbeach and the Oil Mayid, or between the Mizbeach and the Beis HaMikdash, but it doesn't have to block the entrance. We're talking about a Mizbeach that's 32 amas wide, and the Heichel of the Beis HaMikdash is also very wide. Sachakol, the entrance of the Heichel itself, is only 10 amas of that width. And if you want to add to that the entrance of the Ulam, which was even wider, so it was another 10 amas, so it was 20 amas of that width. So seemingly there should still be enough space to have the kiyar actually between the Mizbeach and the Beis HaMikdash, and it's not going to block the entrance. There won't be anything between the Mizbeach and Pesach Oil Mayid. So why is the Braisa saying that this is an issue and you have to pull the kiyar to the side? not between the actual Mizbeach and the Beis HaMikdash. That's the discussion here.
At what point did the Kohen have to wash their hands and feet?
Okay, we learned that before. We learned before in the Masechta when they come in. Here let's focus on the discussion. Here we're discussing the position of where it's positioned.
So why is the Braysh worrying more about the Mizbeach than worrying about the pasuk that says
The Kiyah. It's only way to answer this contradiction. So it must mean that when the pasuk says in between, the in between doesn't mean literally in between, but it means in between in the space of the Azara, but pulled towards the side. It's tight, but it's touching it that way.
It's still in front of the Pesach.
It's not in front of the Pesach.
So,
No,
but the
it's on the
says,
side.
But the pasuk says
Not regarding the Kiyah. The Kiyah does not have to be in front of the Pesach. The Mizbeach has to be directly in front of the Pesach with nothing blocking. But the Kiyah has to be between the Mizbeach and the El Mayit, but it doesn't have to be in front of the Pesach. And therefore the Brayse says, we're going to have to say that it was towards the side, Darim, not mamish in between, not blocking in between the Mizbeach and even not the Pesach. That's not the issue here. It's not even between the Mizbeach and the wall of the Oyel Mayit.
It's not.
No, it was towards the side, towards Darim.
So the question
Let's see. So the Gemara now says, "My kasova." So what is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili regarding the position of the Mizbeach? Ikasovar, if Rabbi Yossi's opinion is, Kole Mizbeach bedarim. The entire Mizbeach, the 32 amas of the width of the Mizbeach, is all on the Darim. So then what's the problem? Koi, that is, it's standing all on the Darim. Noikmei mikaisel heichal v'ledarim. So from the wall of the heichal, so like I mentioned, the opening of the door of the heichal is only 10 amas. But after that opening, now that the Beis HaMikdash was right in the center of the Azara, which means that in that opening of 10 amas of the Heichal, 5 of it was towards the Tzafin and 5 of it was towards the Darim. But then after that door, after that entrance, that is, so you have the wall of the Heichal. So, Naikmei Mikaisel Heichal V'Ladarim. Bein Ulam Ulam Mizbeach. You can place the Kiyar between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. It's not going to block the entrance into the Heichal. Because right after the end of the entrance, you have enough space in the Darim wall, in the Darim side of the wall, of this wall, of the front of the Beis HaMikdash, that's between the Mizbeach and the Beis HaMikdash. Because the Mizbeach is completely on Darim. So you have a lot of space of the Mizbeach that goes towards Darim, because the Mizbeach is 32 amas wide. So why not place the Kiyar actually between the Mizbeach and the Oyel Mayit, just right after the end of the entrance of the Heichel? That it can't block, not the entrance, but right after the entrance, you can place it there. Now, even if you're going to say that Rabbi Yossi Glili holds that you can't place it right after the entrance between the Mizbeach and the Ulam, because he holds Kedushas Heichel v'Ulam Chodehi. The Kedusha of the Heichal and the Ulam that's in front, another chamber that's in front of it, is considered to be one. And therefore, you're not allowed to block not only between the Mizbeach and the entrance of the Heichal, which as I mentioned was 10 amas wide, but also you can't block between the Mizbeach and the entrance into the Ulam, which is 20 amas wide. So then that means that towards Darim, you have another 5 amas of a wall. Of an opening, that is, that you can't block. But you still have enough space to place the Kiyar over there that should be between the Mizbeach and the Beis HaMikdash. Noikmei mikaisel ulam uledarim. Bein ulam lemizbeach. You still have enough space after the entrance that of the ulam ends and it begins the wall of the ulam. There's still more space there where the Mizbeach, which is completely on Darim, that you can place the Kiyar there. There's no reason to put the Kiyar on the side after the Mizbeach. Now, furthermore, the Gemara now says, even if Rabbi Yossi Glili holds Chetze B'Tzofin, V'Chetze B'Darim, that the Mizbeach was right in the middle of the Azara, so half of it is in Tzofin, half of it is in Darim. So if the Mizbeach is 32 amas wide, so what that means is that 16 amas of the Mizbeach is in Tzofin and 16 amas of the Mizbeach is on the Darim side. So still the same thing. Noikmei, I could place the Kiyar, Mikaisel, Heichal, Uledarim, at the end of the entrance, the Kiyar does not have to block the entrance, and there still should be space because the Mizbeach is continues into the Darim side. It's right in the center, so it continues into the Darim side 16 amas, and the opening of the doorway of the Heichal is only 5 amas into the Darim. So after that 5 amas, you can place the kiyah right there. It's still between the Beis HaMikdash and the Mizbeach. It's not a problem. And furthermore, like we said before, even if Rabbi Yosef Glili holds Kedushas Ha'ulam Ve'echel Chodehi, that I have to place the kiyah in a space which is not going to block not only not the entrance of the Heichel, but it can block the entrance of the Ulam as well, because the Ulam and the Heichel are one thing, and therefore the entrance of the Ulam is an additional 5 amas. But still the space, because that means that from the Darim, part of the Azara, the entrance of the Ulam and the Heichel together take up 10 amas. But the Mizbeach stuck into the Darim side 16 amas, because it was right in the center, so it went in 60 amas. So Neikme Mikaisel Ulam Darim Bein Ulam Mizbeach. You still have space after the entrance of the Ulam and the Heichel. You still have space of the wall between the Ulam and the Mizbeach that you can place the kiyah there. So why is Rabbi Yosef Glili saying that the kiyah has to be placed not between but outside further south? That's in that space, but that's between the Ulam and the Mizbeach, but not actually between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. So Elalav says the Gemara, so don't you think that it must be Mishum de Kesavar, because Rabbi Yosef Glili holds Kule Mizbeach Betzafim. The entire Mizbeach is all in Safin. So what does this mean? If the whole Mizbeach is in Safin, so then from the actual opening of the Heichel, there was only 5 amas of Safin side, because again, the opening of the Heichel is in the center of the Azara, and it's 10 amas wide, 5 on the Tzafin side, 5 on the Darim side, so there's only 5 amas of the opening that's in the Tzafin. And then if you count also the opening of the Ulam, so you have 10 amas. So therefore, so the Gemara here says, Kinami Mike Misla Mikaisel Heichel Tzafin, if you're going to place it from after the opening of the end of the opening of the Heichel, that's on the Tzafin side, Havale bin Ulam Ulam Mizbeach. It still actually should be between Ulam and the Mizbeach. The Gemara is actually here asking a question. When you read the Gersa that we have in our Gemara, Kinami Mike Misla, it doesn't sound like a question, but there's another Gersa here, which it sounds like this is Rashi's Gersa. If you look over here in the Eis Aleph of Dagaz V'Tziyunim, and the Eis V'Chali Gemara, it says the Gemara now is asking, that even if you tell me that the Mizbeach is completely on the Tzafin, okay, so I understand that you can't have the kiyah placed between the Mizbeach and the Beis HaMikdash on the Darim side. It's not on the Darim side. It's totally on the Tzafin side. Okay, so you don't want to block any space between the Mizbeach and the entrance into the Beis HaMikdash. So where do you not block? You don't block that last 5 amas between the opening of the Heichel and the Mizbeach. It's only that 5 amas. That's the opening. Or, as the Gemara will say now, an additional 5 amas because of the opening of the Ulam. Let's say, so if you look over here in Dagos V'Tziyunim, it says, the Gemara is asking, V'noikmei, but if so, you could still place the kiyah ben Heichel ulet Tzafin. After the opening of the Heichel, further, at the wall of Tzafin, there's enough space over there to place the kiyah there. Why aren't we placing it further Tzafin after the opening of the Heichel? So the answer to that would be Kesavar Kedushas Heichel v'Ulam Chodehi, that the Kedusha of the Ulam and the Heichel is all one, so you can't place it after the opening of the Heichel, because then you also have an additional 5 amas of the wall of the Ulam, or of the opening of the Ulam. So then, going back inside the Gemara, so the Gemara continues and asks, but there's still more space on the Tzafin side to place the kiyah there. V'noikme, you could still place the kiyah, Mikaisel Ulam ulet Tzafin, after the end of the opening of the entrance of the Ulam, which is an additional 5 amas going into Tzafin. There's still space to put the kiyah there, Bein Ulam u'le Mizbeach, between the Ulam and the Mizbeach. Okay, so the Gemara is basically asking, what are you gaining by saying that Rabbi Yosef Glili holds that the Mizbeach was totally in Safin, instead of being totally in Darim? The Mizbeach was 32 amas wide. There's still enough space to have the kiyah between the Mizbeach and the Beis HaMikdash without blocking the entrance. So why are we putting the kiyah on the side? Oh, but the Gemara explains, no, if we say the Mizbeach was totally in Safin, we know why you can't put the kiyah there on the Safin side. Because regarding the Tzafin side of the Azara, the pasuk says Tzafayna. When it speaks about the karbanis that have to be the oila that has to be shechted in Tzafin, it says Tzafayna. Why does it say the word Tzafayna with a hey? Why not Tzafin? It's coming to tell you she ate Tzafain Panoi Mikelim. The Tzafin of the Beis HaMikdash has to be totally empty of any vessels. So therefore, placing the kiyah north of the entrance of the Ulam and the Heichel is not a possibility. And so therefore, if you're going to place it anywhere else You can't place it anywhere in Safin. Your only option is to place it further out, not exactly between the Mizbeach and the Ulam, but further out towards the Adam. So therefore, we see over here that Rabbi Yosef Glili holds that the entire Mizbeach was all, that the entire Mizbeach was all Ansafin. Therefore, the Gemara says that the Mishnah before that was quoted is Rabbi Yosef Glili and not necessarily Rabbi Yosef. Says the Gemara, "Aman Tana the Palagaled Rabbi Yosef Glili." Who is the Tana that disagrees with Rabbi Yosef Glili regarding the Mizbeach that it was not all in Safin? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov. Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov disagrees with this. The Tanya, because we learned in the Braisa. Rabbi Lazar ben Yaakov, Tzafaina, he also dashes the same word. Tzafaina, she ate Safon Panoi Miklum. But he says it means that it has to be completely empty. Va'afile min amizbeach. Even the Mizbeach should not be in Safin either, and therefore the Mizbeach was completely on Darim. So he is the one that argues on the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Glili. Okay, this is the conclusion of the Gemara regarding exactly where the Mizbeach was positioned. I hope it's clear. I think over there they have a bunch of pictures for this. When you see it in the pictures, it's very simple to understand this. Okay. The Gemara starts a new subject, also regarding the Mizbeach. Omer Rav, so Rav said, Mizbeach shenivkam. If there's a blemish in the Mizbeach, we learned before how the Mizbeach was built. It was made out of these very smooth rocks, and they made a mold, and they poured the smooth rocks together with plaster and tar, and to make it extremely smooth, because the Mizbeach may not have a blemish, even a drop, even something that you could feel with a nick with your nail. It makes the Mizbeach puzzle. So a Mizbeach that has a pagam, kol ha-kachim shenichshchetu sham, all karbanos that are shechted in this time when the Mizbeach has the pagam. The karbanos are not being shechted on the Mizbeach, they're being shechted in the Azara. But if they're shechted in the time when the Mizbeach has a pagam, psulim. So the karbanos shechted will be pasul. Says the Gemara now, Mikra haya biyadeno. Rav said that there was a pasuk that we had in our hands to prove this point. V'shachachnuhu, but we forgot what this pasuk is. Now, Kisalik Rav Kahane, when Rav Kahane went to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkechel Rav Shimon beRebbi, Tekama Mishum Rav Yishmael beRabbi Yosi. So he encountered someone that had the source for this. Rabbi Yishmael beRebbi said the name of Rabbi Yishmael beRabbi Yosi, that Minayin leMizbeach shenivgam. How do I know if the Mizbeach has a blemish? Shekol hakatchav shenishchetu sham, that all karbanos shechted in that time, psulim, will not be valid. Shenema, the pasuk says, "V'zavachta olav es eilasecha v'eshlomecha." This is the same pasuk that we brought before, explaining the first Mishnah in this Pedic. And the pasuk says that you shech the karbanis on the mizbeach. V'chi olav ataziveyach. Do you actually shecht on the mizbeach? Yeah, the truth is, the Gemara actually, Taisus points out of it, the Gemara did bring before that although you don't have to shecht on the mizbeach, but you could shecht on the mizbeach. Both the Oila and the Shlamim. There was a machlokes before which section of the Mizbeach qualifies to Shecht the Oila and the Shlamim, but you could Shecht on the Mizbeach. But the Gemara is still asking, it sounds like it's a mitzvah, that you should, that you must Shecht on the Mizbeach. So the Gemara is asking, is it actually a mitzvah that you should be Shechting on the Mizbeach? So what does it mean, V'zavachta olav? Ella, what we learn from this pasuk is, Keshahu shale, when the Mizbeach is whole, and there's no pagam, then you could Shecht. When you don't have the olav, the complete mizbeach intact, then the karbanos that you shecht, even in the azara, will be pasul. So Omar of Kahana said, when he heard this, Hainu kra d'ishtamet leile Rav. This is the pasuk that Rav forgot, which is the source for this halacha. Okay, so now according to what Rav says, if the mizbeach is blemished, so what do you have to do? You have to fix the mizbeach before you're going to shecht the carbon. And if you fix the mizbeach, then it's fine. But now Rabbi Yechanan argues on this. Rabbi Yechanan says, if you have karbonis, behemoths that were already sanctified to be a carbon, and the Mizbeach got a pagam, you're not going to be able to fix the Mizbeach to be machshir, these karbonis to be shechted. He says, echad zeh ve'echad zeh. Whether it's a case where you did not fix the Mizbeach, like Rav was speaking about, and you shechted it while the Mizbeach still had a blemish, or even in a case where you did go ahead and fix it, and then you shechted the carbon, psulen, it'll still be pasul. If there was this time period where the Mizbeach had a pagam, and these behemoths that were there, kachim, that were supposed to be shechted, there was a time period that they could not be shechted, it now becomes pasul forever. You can't bring them as a carbon again. What is this based on? This is based on, we'll see in the continuation of the Gemara, but this is based on the halacha regarding kachim. By kachim, there's a halacha that any kachim that was nira, it was roy, it was fit to be brought as a carbon, and then it was nitche, it was disqualified for whatever reason. And even if it's nira again, even if now it's qualified again, once it was disqualified, doesn't get elevated again to the status of being qualified. Once it's rejected, it remains rejected. So since there was a blemish on the mizbeach, and at that time period this behemoth was possible to be brought as a carbon here, so that even if you fixed it, it will not help. But Rav didn't hold to this. Rav held, no, if you'll fix it, you could bring these karbanis. So the Gemara explains, "Malai pligi," what's the basis of their machlokes? Rav Sava, Rav holds by the Chayim and Nidochem. This halacha that if there's a carbon that was fit to be brought, then it was rejected, that you cannot ever bring it again afterwards. That's not by live animals. Regarding live animals, even if there was something that disqualified it, and then now it qualifies again, it doesn't get rejected. You could bring it as a carbon, so you can fix the mizbech and bring it. However, Rav Yechanan Sava, Rav Yechanan holds, Bali Chayim Nidochem. This halacha of nirev and nitche applies even to live animals. Once it was disqualified because of the pekam of the mizbeach, you can never bring it again. Okay, so the Gemara asks on Rav's opinion from a Braise Meisvei. The Braise says the following lashon: Kol hakochim shahayu, all the karbanis, the kochim that were there, actually nivna mizbeach, before they were sanctified as karbanis, before the mizbeach was built. V'achakach nivna, and then the mizbeach was built. HaMizbeach, again, v'achkach nivna HaMizbeach, and then the Mizbeach was built, psulin. They will be possible to be brought as a carbon. That's the lashon of the Braise. Okay, so now the Gemara will explain, what does this Braise mean? Why, if you will makdish these animals before the Mizbeach was built, should they be possible after the Mizbeach is built? Says the Gemara, nivna, if we would simply learn the Braise as it says. Let's say in the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash, and they came to build the Beis HaMikdash, and they didn't build the Mizbeach yet. And Yidden already sanctified karbonis, and you have the kachim that are waiting to be brought before the mizbeach is built, and then the mizbeach is built. It's going to be possible to be brought as a carbon. Why is this? So you'll say the reason is because when they were makdish these animals, there was no mizbeach yet. So you were makdish animals that were not fit to be brought as a carbon in the first place. And therefore, even after you build the mizbeach, they have been in a situation where they were not fit as a carbon. So therefore, even after the mizbeach is built, you can never bring it as a carbon. But the Gemara says, if that's what the Braise is saying, this is what's called something that was never fit. From the first moment that you were makdish them, they were not qualified at all to be brought as a carbon because there was no mizbeach there. And the question is, Rashi says, this is also an argument, there's Amiroim that argue about this, whether a carbon that from the first moment you were makdish it was not qualified, whether now, if it does become, for something changes and it qualifies later, will it be rejected or not? So this Braise is clearly saying that it would not be qualified. So that would be a question on the opinion that says that in such a case, it still would qualify later on. So therefore, that can't be the pshat in this Braise. So Elo, we have to change what the Braise is saying. The language of the Braise should be different. Actually, neres hamizbeach, the Yidden were makdish karbanis to be brought before the Beis Hamikdash and the Mizbeach were destroyed, which would mean that in the end of the first Beis Hamikdash, they were makdish karbanis. And then what happened? The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and 70 years later, the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt. You want to bring those karbanis. Right, so you have them. So it was fit to be brought as a carbon in the first Beis Hamikdash. Then it was destroyed, and now it's rebuilt and it's fit again. That's we could say this Braise is speaking about. Says the Gemara, Neras. This is the case. It was destroyed 70 years later. This animal is already very old and frail. It's not kosher for a carbon, as Rashi here brings from the Gemara in Pcheiris, that zoking, an animal that's old, is one of the animals that do not qualify at all to be brought as a carbon. So Elo. What is the Braise speaking about? So we would have to say that it's speaking about the case we spoke about before. Actually, nivkam mizbeach, that you were makdish the animals before there was any blemish in the mizbeach. V'achakach nivkam mizbeach, and then there was a blemish in the mizbeach, and this is even when the animal is alive. So now psulin, even if you fix the mizbeach, it'll be puzzle. Exactly like Rabbi Yechanan said, and this is a question on Rav that said that if there's a dichui while the animal is alive, it does not disqualify this animal forever. And if you teach the Braise this way, it means that the Braise is saying it will disqualify it. That's l'chayre how you have to read this Braise. So the Gemara answers according to Rav that no, you don't have to read the words of the Braise this way. V'loi terutzikim b'tartzis. Aren't you being anyways forced to amend the words of the Braise? So if so, amend the words of the Braise that would fit with Rav's opinion. Read the words of the Braise, that not that it says like it read before, the Mizbeach that was Kol HaKotshim, where is the Lashon HaMayim? Kol HaKotshim actually nivne Ashahoyu, all the Kotshim that were there, not Shahoyu, rather Shanishchatu, Karbanis that were already shechted. After the Karbanis was shechted, now here, this is the case the Gemara didn't discuss before, but after the Karbanis are shechted, you're still not done. You have to spray the blood on the Mizbeach, and now if the Mizbeach became disqualified, you can't spray the blood on the Mizbeach when it has a blemish on it. Here, in such a case, everybody, this is Pashat, Rav for sure agrees that now the carbon becomes completely disqualified. Because the whole machlokes before between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan was whether when the animal was alive and there was a moment when it was disqualified, could I say that it will be qualified again? But after the behemoth is already shechted and you have to spray the blood, and now the Mizbeach got a blemish and it was disqualified, even if you fix the Mizbeach, everybody agrees that it's nitche, it was nire, and then it was nitche, and now it will never be qualified again. That's how you read this brisa. Okay, but now though the Gemara asks on this entire premise of what we just said here, if the Mizbeach has only a blemish, you can't shech the carbon. Fragt the Gemara, why is this? But for Rav Gidl Rav Gidl said, also in the name of Rav, Mizbeach Shenekar. This is speaking about the inside Mizbeach, the Mizbeach Hazov, the gold Mizbeach inside of the Beis HaMikdash. Even if it was completely removed from its place, Maktinik Tairis Bim Kaimai. So you don't bring the Ketairis on the Mizbeach itself, which is not there, but you bring it on that spot where the Mizbeach is supposed to be. So if so, we should say the same thing regarding the Mizbeach HaChitzin, the outside Mizbeach and the Azara, that even if that Mizbeach is not there, not only if it's a blemish, even if it's not there, you could still shech the Karbanis in their place in the Azara.
And what are you putting on the floor?
Huh?
And what are you putting the Ketairis?
Yeah, the Ketairis was placed on the floor when there was no Mizbeach there. Yeah. So how are we saying regarding the Mizbeach HaChitzin that if there's even a blemish, that it would be possible to shecht? Answers the Gemara, it's not the same thing. Rava said, Rabbi Yehuda agreed b'domim regarding the bloods, which means the Gemara will soon bring that Rabbi Yehuda holds that when it comes to shechting in the Beis HaMikdash, or when it comes to the place, not shechting, sorry, when it comes to burning the pieces of the carbon, where do you burn the sacrificial parts of a carbon? You're supposed to burn it on the Mizbeach. So as we'll see soon, Rabbi Yehuda says that you could burn it on the Mizbeach, but if there's no place on the Mizbeach, you could burn it in the Azar itself. But Rabbi Yehuda says this only regarding burning, the things that you have to be makted on the Mizbeach. But Rabbi Yehuda is maide regarding the blood, that you can only spray the blood on the Mizbeach. So Hachanami maide Rav b'domim. Rav is maide that only by the inside Mizbeach do we say that if you don't have the Mizbeach, that you can place the Ketairis in the floor in that spot of the Mizbeach. But regarding the outside Mizbeach, since you have to spray the blood on the Mizbeach, if when you're shechting the carbon, you don't have that Mizbeach to spray the blood on it, so then the Shechita itself will be possible as well. So you can't compare the outside Mizbeach to the inside Mizbeach. Now, my Rav Yehuda, this opinion of Rav Yehuda that we just mentioned, that he says that you could burn the Karbanis even on the floor of the Azara, if there's no space on the Mizbeach itself. Not the blood, but you can burn. Where did Rabbi Yehuda say this? The Tanya we learned in the Braisa regarding the time when the first Beis HaMikdash was built. So the pasuk says, "Bayayim ahu kiddush hamelech." So at that time, the king Shlomo HaMelech, he sanctified Toich HaChatzer v'Gaimeh, the interior of the Chatzer. Why? Ki mizbeach she'asa Moshe, or the Gerse here, or the lashon of the pasuk is Ki mizbeach hanachoshes asher lefnei Hashem. The copper mizbeach that's lefnei Hashem. Katoin mahachil. It was too small from containing the space for what has to be burned on the Mizbeach. And therefore what was done? The floor of the Azara was sanctified to have the same Kedusha like the Mizbeach itself, that you could burn the Karbanis on the floor of the Azara. Dvarim kiksavan, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says you have to learn this pasuk in its literal pshat, that they actually sanctified the floor of the Azara to be the same like the Mizbeach itself. Now, in the actual Lashon HaPasuk, as I read it, it says there that we're talking about the Mizbeach HaNechoshes. Now, the Mizbeach that Shlomo HaMelech built was not a Mizbeach Nechoshes, the copper Mizbeach like they had in the Midbar. It was a Mizbeach made of stone, as we learned before. But the pasuk uses the term Mizbeach HaNechoshes according to Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara will explain this later, because the original Mizbeach was copper, so it refers to the stone Mizbeach also with the term Mizbeach HaNechoshes. But what it's really saying is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, even the stone Mizbeach that Shlomo HaMelech built, which as we'll see was much bigger than the Mizbeach that Moshe Rabbeinu built, there still wasn't enough space, and therefore they sanctified the ground, the floor of the Azara itself, to bring the Karbanis on it, or to be maked to the Karbanis there. Amalei Rabbi Yosi, so Rabbi Yosi says to Rabbi Yehuda, but v'haloi, anywhere in the Azara. That's what it seems, yeah. So on this, Rabbi Yosi asks, but v'haloi kvar nema. There's a pasuk that says that Elef Oilis Yale Shloime Ala Mizbeach Hahu. Shloime Melech, before the Beis Hamikdash was built, when you had still the Mishkan and Noiv and Givain, and there they had the copper Mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu, he was able to bring in one day 1,000 oilos to burn on this Mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, regarding the Mizbeach that Shlomo Melech built from stone in the Beis Hamikdash, what does it say regarding this Mizbeach? How many karbanos did he bring on one day? On the day that he inaugurated the Beis Hamikdash, it says, "Vayizbach Shlomo es zevach hashlomim asher zevach lashem baka esrim v'shnayim melech." So from the cattle, it was 22,000, and the pasuk there goes on to say that it was from the tzayin. See the lashon of the pasuk. It says that regarding the tzayin, there was another 122,000. So he brought 142,000 karbanis to be burnt, all on one day. Okay, so now again on the copper mizbeach, how many? It was 1,000, and on the mizbeach that Shlomo built, the stone mizbeach, it was 122,000. Now, so Rabbi Yosi says the kishat megia lechesh ben oilis, 142,000. Thank you. In total, yeah. Or kishat megia lechesh ben oilis. Now, if you make the calculation of how many karbanis were burnt on the mizbeach one day, uleminyan ames, and you also make the calculation of how much space there was for the fire on the mizbeach to burn, you'll see that zeh gadol mizeh, the space that there was on the mizbeach of Shlomo, there was much more space, and actually the amount that Shlomo Melech brought in one day, he could have brought even much more than he actually brought. And Rashi here makes the cheshbon. Rashi makes the cheshbon but the bekitzer, the point of it here is that on the mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu, according to Rabbi Yosi, it was 5 amos by 5 amos. And from that you have to deduct the space of 2 amos on each side, because there was an amma for the krones, for the corners, that's where an amma thick, and then there's another space for the kainim to walk in between. Or not in between the kronis, actually, on the top of the mizbeach, and that's on each side. So you have to deduct on each side 2 amos. So that's, you're taking off 4 amos of the roof of the mizbeach. That means that the place for the fire to burn was only an amma by an amma. That's it. Very small space to burn 1,000 karbanis in one day. When it came to the mizbeach that Shlomo Melech built, how big was the space of the fire of the marocha where they built where they were able to burn the karbanis? 20 by 20 amos, which means 400 square amos. That's 400 times as big as what was by Moshe Rabbeinu. So that means that if by Moshe Rabbeinu in a square amma they're able to burn 1,000 karbanis in a day, so by Shlomo Melech they should be able to burn 400,000 karbanis in one day. That's much more than the 142,000 that he burnt in one day. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda is arguing there was no problem with space on the mizbeach that Shlomo Melech built to burn karbanis there. It wasn't necessary to sanctify the floor of the Azara to have additional space. The cheshbon comes out that it's much more. It's perfectly fine. So Elamao kat mehachol. What does it mean when the pasuk says that Shlomo Melech sanctified because the space was too small? What this means is he's saying that the old mizbeach, the mizbeach hanachoshes, Rabbi Yehuda does taich kipshuta. We're talking here about the old copper mizbeach. That the reason Shlomo Melech did not anymore use that old copper mizbeach, and instead he built a new massive stone mizbeach, was because it was too small. And the expression the pasuk here is using is similar to what a person would say regarding his friend. Ploini nanasu. This kohen is a midget or pasal avodah, and he's too small to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. Which means that really, even if he's someone that's puzzle, but you don't want to say about him that he's puzzle, so you say that he's too small and he can't serve. So too, the pasuk doesn't want to say that the mizbeach was puzzle, so therefore it uses the expression that the mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu was kat mehachol. It was too small, and therefore he didn't want to use it. So it's using this. It's using a more proper language regarding this. But there was no issue in the size of the mizbeach Shlomo Melech built was big enough.
What do you have to be Mekadesh Dazara for?
He didn't. The pasuk is not talking about being Mekadesh Dazara. It's talking about being Mekadesh the Teicha Chotzer. True. It's yeah. I mean, you're right. It does say in the pasuk the Teicha Chotzer, but no, not for the Ketores. No. It's he's saying The pasuk here, according to this pshat, is coming to say that they passled. They passled the mizbeach and the chayshes. They removed it, that it shouldn't be used. Why it says in the pasuk the chotzer, I'm not sure how it fits according to this pshat of Rabbi Yehuda. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, the point is that they passled the copper mizbeach and they replaced it with the stone mizbeach of Shlomo HaMelech. Okay, now the Gemara explains Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. In fact, the Gemara of Rabbi Yehuda Shapa Kam Rabbi Yasi, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yasi is proving him regarding the size of this mizbeach that it was large enough. Answers the Gemara, no, not necessarily. Rabbi Yehuda follows his opinion regarding how large the mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu was. So we're going with the premise that Moshe Rabbeinu's mizbeach was as large as it says in the lashon of the pasuk in Parshas Truma, that it was 5 by 5 amas, and you have to deduct 4 amas from the roof of the mizbeach, so that it comes out that the space for the fire on top, as I mentioned, was an amma by an amma. But not according to Rabbi Yasi, because he says the amma mizbeach shasa Moshe gadol haya. The mizbeach that Moshe Rabbeinu made was actually double the size. The Tanya, we learned in a Braisa when it says Chamish Amas Oirech v'Chamish Amas Reichav. The mizbeach was 5 by 5 amas. Dvarim kiksavan divrei Rabbi Yasi. Rabbi Yasi says the pasuk means literally, as we were learning till now. As Rabbi Yasi explained, it was 5 by 5 amas. However, Rabbi Yehuda says no. Nemakan ravua. The pasuk here says that it's square. It says 5 by 5, but then it says it's square. And v'nema lahalon ravua. And there's another place, and this is in Yecheskel. It says there that the mizbeach is square. Now, malalon, just like over there, when it says the size of the mizbeach, me'emtza isa hayamoided, what it means is that you measure from the middle to both sides. Which means over there by Yecheskel it says that the mizbeach was 12 by 12. But it doesn't actually mean that the square was 12 by 12. What it means is that when you're standing in the center of the mizbeach, measure from the center to one side 12, and measure from the center to the other side 12. Which means that it was double. It was 24 by 24 amas. So too over here, Afkan, by the Mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Kapra Mizbeach, you measure the 5 by 5 when you're standing in the center. You measure to each side 5, and that means that it was 10 by 10. Now, the Gemara here brings V'hasal Minalon. How do I know that over there, by the Mizbeach, that it says by Yecheskel, that it's not literally 12, but it's double 12? You have to measure from the center 12 twice. Because the Chsib, the Pasuk there says V'ho'ariel, which is a term used for the Mizbeach, because it had the fire like a lion. Shtei Mesrei Ama L'chol Ruach, that it was 12 amas to each side. And this means 24, not 12. And the Gemara explains how do we know this. Oyena Elo Yud Beis Al Yud Beis. Maybe it does literally mean 12 by 12, but that can't be. Why not? Because when the pasuk says El Arbas Revaov, to all of its 4 corners, that's extra. Why is the pasuk saying this? Melamed, what it's teaching you is Shemei Emtza Humayded, that you stand in the center and you measure from the center to each one of the sides, and there'll be 12. That's what you see over there by the Mizbeach of Yecheskel. The same is also when it comes to the Mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu, that it wasn't 5 amas by 5 amas, rather it was 10 amas by 10 amas. So now Rashi makes the cheshbon there. If this is the case, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it will come out that the Mizbeach of Shloimeh was too small to bring the 142,000 oilis in one day. The Kitzer, what's the cheshbon? The cheshbon is if Moshe Rabbeinu's Mizbeach is 10 amas by 10 amas wide, that means that the space for the fire on the Mizbeach is going to be a square of 6 amas by 6 amas. You have to deduct 2 amas on each side from the 10 amas, so you're going to have the 6 amas in the middle, a square of 6 amas. That's by the Mizbeach of Moshe Rabbeinu. As mentioned before, by the Mizbeach of Shloimeh, it was 20 amas by 20 amas. So 20 amas by 20 amas, in contrast to 6 amas by 6 amas, is only 11 times the size. If it's only 11 times the size, so if by Moshe Rabbeinu's Mizbeach it says that Shlomo was able to bring 1,000 karbanis in a day, so when Shlomo Melech is bringing karbanis on the Mizbeach of stone that he built, which is 11 times the size, that should be only 11,000 karbanis. But it says that he brought 142,000 karbanis. It's much more than 11,000. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda, according to his opinion, says it must be that he also sanctified the floor of the Azara to burn the karbanis there. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Okay, so now the Gemara explains this Gzeira Shava of Ravua, which is the source of the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. What does Rabbi Yasi learn from that Gzeira Shava? Rabbi Yasi says Kigam Gzeira Shava. He also learns this Gzeira Shava, but from another place and regarding something else. The Gaiva who the Gamer. He learns out this Gzeira Shava regarding the height of the Mizbeach. The Tanya, because we learned about this in a Braisa as well. Also, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yasi argue about this. Shalish Amish Kemasa, it says regarding the Mizbeach in the Zara by the Mishkan that it was 3 amas high, which is a pretty low mizbeach. 3 amas, about 4.5 feet high. So Dvarim Kiksavan, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, yeah, it was literally only 3 amas high. Rabbi Yossi says that no, Nema kan ravua. Here the pasuk says regarding the mizbeach by Moshe Rabbeinu that it was square. Nema lahalon ravua, and it also says the lashon of the pasuk ravua regarding the mizbeach that was by the inside mizbeach, also by Moshe Rabbeinu, but we're talking now about the inside mizbeach. By the inside mizbeach, the height is double of its length, because the length and the width of the inside mizbeach was an amma by an amma, and the height was 2 amas. Afkan, so too with the outside mizbeach, pishnaim karkai. It was twice of its. The height was twice of its length. So if the length of the outside mizbeach was 5 amas by 5 amas, so that means that the height was 10 amas, much more than 3 amas. That's how Rabbi Yossi darshans this Gzeira Shaveh of Ravua regarding the height of the Mizbeach, not regarding the width of the Mizbeach. Amalei Rabbi Yehuda, so Rabbi Yehuda says about this, how could you say that the Mizbeach was so tall? The pasuk says regarding the curtains that were around the chutzner of the Mishkan. It says here that the height of the curtains was only 5 amas tall. But now, what this would mean is the Mizbeach, which was 10 amas tall, so the Mekayin is standing on the Mizbeach and doing the Avodah there, and the Mizbeach is much taller than the curtains. Why were the curtains there? The curtains were there to create a blockage of the Avodah, that it shouldn't be exposed for everybody to see, for the covet of the Avodah to be tznius. But according to Rabbi Yossi, could it be that the Kain stands on the Mizbeach, and he's doing the Avodah in his hands on the Mizbeach, and the curtains are not really accomplishing anything. They're 5 amas lower than the 10 amas tall of the Mizbeach. Rabbi Yossi, so Rabbi Yossi says, actually, in my opinion, the curtains of the Azara were much taller, because there's a pasuk that says, that you have the curtains that were by the Chotzer, and they were by the opening of the Chotzer, that were Asher ala Mishkan, they covered the Mishkan and the Mizbeach. So what we learn out of it here is Ma Mishkan Yudamis, just like the Mishkan, the height of the Krushim, the height of the walls of the Mishkan was 10 amas tall, Af Mizbeach Yudamis. So we learn from the comparison and the lashon of the pasuk that the curtains are covering the Mishkan and the Mizbeach. It says it together that the Mizbeach was also Yudamis, as he also learned out before from Revuah that it was 10 amas tall. Now the pasuk says regarding the curtains, how high were the curtains? So again, if you learn the simple pshat of the pasuk, it says that the curtains were 5 amas tall. But now Rabbi Yossi says that regarding the Klayim, it says Klayim Chomesh Esra Ama Ela Kosef, that the Klayim were 15 amas on that side. By the entrance, there was on 2 sides. They had the Klayim. Now the simple pshat of the pasuk actually is the 15 amas refers in the length of it, not in the height of it. But Rabbi Yossi darshans that this refers to the height of it. The height was 15 amas high. So if it's 15 amas high, it's tall enough to block the Mizbeach, which was only 10 amas high. Now, it says that it was only 5 amas tall. That means Misfas Mizbeach Ulamayla, that it's only from the end of the Mizbeach, which is 10 amas tall, the curtains are an additional 5 amas tall. When it says that the Mizbeach was only 3 amas tall, what does this mean? Misfas Soiviv Olamayla. That means the Mizbeach had this ledge in the middle for the Kohanim to walk around. From that Soiviv to the top roof of the Mizbeach, that was only 3 amas, but not the entire Mizbeach. The entire Mizbeach was actually 10 amas tall. Okay, it continues over here. I guess it's the middle of an Indian. It continues all the way down. We'll stop over here regarding this again.